The battle over how to spend Duval County's hard-earned dollars is heating up. The mayor has dropped her budget proposal. Now it's time for City Council to tear through the numbers. With the new fiscal year kicking off in October, today on This Week in Jacksonville, we're cutting straight to the chase. What's top of the list? Public safety, infrastructure, affordable housing. And are there any jaw-dropping surprises hiding in the fine print? To break it all down, we've got government law attorney Chris Hand in the house for a no-nonsense deep dive. Next on This Week in Jacksonville. So glad you're with us. Chris Hand joining us for our monthly episode called Hand on Government. Our focus, naturally, the City of Jacksonville budget proposal from Mayor Donna Deegan just happened this week. So this is an experience that you took part in as Chief of Staff for Jacksonville's Mayor Alvin Brown. What's your first blush reaction to seeing this budget proposal from Mayor Deegan?
Well, Ken, this is the kind of budget that city officials generally appreciate having, in that there was a lot of concern and speculation, because we're seeing it around the country with cities and counties, and there was actually even some projections that suggested the city might run a significant deficit this year. That turned out not to be the case. Between increased property tax revenue, with a one-time contribution from JEA, with what's called utility service tax increases, the city actually has some additional money to invest this year. So again, I think the city, the good news, if you're working in the city government, they don't have the deficits that are very difficult to close. We dealt with multiple years of that when I was at the city government.
Early 2010s.
Exactly. Very much more difficult decisions that have to be made under those circumstances. Not that they don't have to be made now, but having this additional revenue certainly makes some of those decisions easier than they would be in a different scenario. But it's a $2 billion budget. This is the first time the City of Jacksonville budget has crossed that $2 billion threshold. Just to put this in some perspective, during the period of time I was at the city from 2011 to 2015, the budget was around $1 billion. So in that 10-year span has increased, has doubled, has increased by an additional $1 billion. And as you say, in your intro, allocated to a variety of different functions. About half of the budget is directed to public safety between the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Division, both in terms of their operations and also building in some of the recent pay increases that the Deegan administration negotiated with them, and some of the increased pension costs as police and fire officers have the ability now to go into a defined benefit plan, the Florida retirement system. So that's the bulk of the budget. But the Deegan administration, in its proposal, also invested in some other priorities. We have our next payment to the renovated stadium that the Jacksonville Jaguars play in, significant investment in parks, especially downtown parks here in the city. But again, the mayor's job in this process, Kent, is to propose a budget. Now the budget goes to City Council. Under our charter, this is ultimately the council's responsibility. They'll have a series of budget hearings in August. They'll review the budget. They'll make changes to the budget. They'll pass an ultimate budget and then send that back to the mayor. She has the ability to exercise some line item veto of the budget, but ultimately now it's in council's court. They'll make the final decisions.
So City Council President Kevin Carrico said when the mayor started speaking about improvements in literacy, it talked about the schools getting A grades. I mean, those are things that really warm my heart. So I was really encouraged by that. And as we go forward, we get to actually dive in and look at the details. That's the City Council President Kevin Carrico. What does that say about what this process might look like in these ensuing months before October?
Well, the initial tone has been good, and there was some concern that it might be sort of less than constructive. But obviously the mayor, in her budget address, very clearly reached out to the council president and said, look, I want us to work together to sort of maintain momentum in the city. His initial reaction and the initial reaction of many of his colleagues have been positive. I think largely because the mayor's budget avoided some of the hot button issues that have, in the past created sort of conflicts between mayoral administrations and cities. Well, and the councils. Well, right. One, for example, is last year the mayor proposed to spend a significant amount of money from the city reserves as part of the budget. Yeah. This year they decided not to do that. That removed one issue of previous concern to the council. Fully funding the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Division. The fact that, that occurred, I think also removes one obstacle in the relationship. And look, it's also just worth saying, Kent, that when there is additional money to invest, that has the ability and the effect of kind of lowering tensions, because there's a bigger pie and more slices to hand out at that point. During periods when the city is struggling with revenue, like the period where I was chief of staff at the city, tensions are just automatically higher because there's less revenue to go around among a variety of competing priorities. But that's not going to be a challenge in this year's budget. The mayor was largely able to fund many of her priorities. So far, there hasn't been significant pushback, but this process is young yet.
Yeah, right.
Council really does take a proprietary interest in the budget. Under the charter, it's their responsibility. The council has always historically felt very strongly about the fact that it is their process to ultimately come up with a final budget and a final millage rate. And Kent, that is where the tension may come in this year's budget. Just in the last kind of week since the mayor made her budget presentation, the council president and some other members of the council, like the finance chair, Raul Arias, the former finance chair, Ron Salem, have floated the idea that they might consider a small millage decrease, property tax decrease in the budget that could have an impact of anywhere from $12.5 million to $25 million. The mayor's office has recommended keeping our property tax rate the same as it was in past years. We'll have to see if City Council follows through on reducing millage, but that could create that dynamic we've seen in past budgets, because that would obviously lower the amount of revenue that's available, and then there may be more competition for the resources that exist this year.
Well, so we know part of the plan here. Finance Committee and City Council, they'll review this plan. They may suggest changes, as you noted. But the first meeting for them on the budget is scheduled for August 7th. And then, as we've talked about under the law, final budget has to be approved by the full City Council before October 1st, because that's when the budget goes into effect. So typically, City Council will vote on that sometime in September, right?
Right. They have typically they have two meetings every month, but the two in September are very budget focused. The first one, they do what's called laying the budget on the table. The Finance Committee sort of formally presents the budget to the full council. That's also a moment where there's a lot of public comment on the budget as well. The council can make changes at either of the September meetings, but they typically pass it at their second meeting in September, kind of in that final week of the month. One thing, speaking of public comment, Kent, remember, we talk about this a lot on this show, and I think it's important always to repeat. The City of Jacksonville organizational chart, it's not the mayor, it's not the city council at the top of that, it's the citizenry. This is, as the mayor said in her budget address, this is the people's budget, it's the citizens' budget. It's really crucial that if people have thoughts, ideas on what the City of Jacksonville's budget priorities should be, that's what a budget is,
right.
A statement of priorities.
Yeah.
If they have ideas on that, really crucial to engage throughout this process. As you said, the Council Finance Committee is going to have a series of budget hearings starting on August 7th. Those are opportunities for citizens to engage. The two full council meetings in September are opportunities for citizens to engage. And picking up the phone or shooting an email to those 6 council members who directly represent each of us. That's our district council member and the 5 at-large members who represent everyone in the city. Reaching out and kind of sharing our thoughts as citizens on what we think the City of Jacksonville's priorities should or should not be, crucially important part of this process.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. All right, so we're going to keep dissecting the budget proposal, including what Mayor Deegan wants so that the city can address affordable housing. That's part of our discussion. Stay with us on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And our Hand on Government episode continues now. Chris Hand, and a government law attorney, former chief of staff, City of Jacksonville. I want to get to affordable housing and infrastructure and some of the other things in the budget, but were there any surprises to you, anything that stood out and head scratchers or anything like that in this budget proposal?
There always are, and Ken, I just want to issue the disclaimer. Unlike most normal people, I really enjoy diving in and get into the granular nature of the budget and seeing all those individual line items. There were a couple of those that surprised me. For example, there is an appropriation in the budget of about $105,000 from the City of Jacksonville to St. Johns County, our neighbor to the south. I don't know if that's due to some intra-local agreement or something, but that'll be curious to find out more about that. But I was interested, the mayor, when she announced and over the course of, when she took office and over the course of her term, has talked a lot about her different priorities, and many of those priorities were funded in this budget, whether that's health care or parks. But one that didn't seem to have increased funding was the idea of both support for nonprofits and for cultural organizations. We have two major grant programs at the City of Jacksonville: the Public Service Grant Program, in which the council appropriates money to the Public Service Grant Committee, which then sort of awards that based on applications. And then the Cultural Service Grant Program, very similar process. Each of those got about $7 million, the exact amount they got the year before. That was a little bit surprising because the mayor and her team have articulated that both nonprofits and arts and culture are important priorities for the community and are both sort of types of funding that have really had some challenges in recent years. In the nonprofit community, there's obviously been big changes at the federal government level that have created some challenges for nonprofits. For cultural organizations, a series of funding cuts at the state level and even last year at the local level that have made it difficult for those organizations. And that's a little bit surprising. I know the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, for example, has identified that, for the $7 million the city invested in cultural service grants last year, there was $135 million in economic impact in that. There's a 30-to-1 return on investment for money the city puts in. So
most of us would say, I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly right. No, that is an ROI all of us would be happy to embrace. So it was a bit surprising that the mayor's office did not, given that it had some additional resources that maybe weren't contemplated, that there weren't some additional investments in nonprofits and in arts and cultural organizations, given their impact on the economy, but also given their impact on the city's vibrancy. I mean, Kent, we know there was a report that came out last month. I don't agree with it, but said that the city of Jacksonville is the most boring out of the 75 major cities in the country. Again, I don't agree with that study, but it does raise the bigger question of how do cities and counties invest in quality of life and in vibrancy? One of the best ways to do that is through arts and cultural organizations. So again, a bit of a surprise in the budget.
Yeah, well, one thing that's very important to the mayor and to city council to hear everybody talk about it. Mayor Deegan in this budget proposal has an allocation to address homelessness. And it was kind of a bone of contention for in the last budget, city council actually slashed her requested $11 million down to $2.2 million last year. There's another allocation here to address homelessness.
Well, you're absolutely right, Kent. That has been a consistent priority of the mayor, and not just of the mayor. Throughout the state of Florida, even the country, affordable or attainable housing is a great concern. In fact, as you know, just in the last several months, there was a new University of North Florida Public Opinion Research Lab poll in which residents, people, those polled here in this city, identified affordable housing as their biggest concern. Again, something the mayor has been focused on since she took office, and there is another $12 million in this budget. What we do not know yet is how the city council will respond to that. Last year, as you pointed out, they removed some of that money from the budget. But this year, some of the triggers for that action last year don't exist. The mayor's not using any money from reserves, which was a big concern last year. There's no concern about investments in police and fire. So it remains to be seen what the council will do, but some of the kind of motivation for making that change last year doesn't seem to exist this year.
I wanted to talk about the infrastructure request. The mayor is requesting a 64% increase to $51 million in funding, and that's for roadway resurfacing, sidewalk repairs, construction, intersection improvements, that sort of thing.
Well, that's exactly right. And Kent, the entire infrastructure budget is very significant. It's just under $700 million. That's a nearly $200 million increase over last year, and funds a variety of things, not just those kind of road and street improvements that you just referred to, but also, for example, our next installment in terms of kind of contributing to the renovation of the stadium, $210 million is due. And the city's making a major investment in parks, particularly downtown parks. Really, when you add all the different pieces together, Ken, it's really more than $100 million invested in parks between the downtown parks they're investing in, countywide parks, and also another $15 million going to the Emerald Trail. So that's one of the big, I think, noteworthy aspects of this budget. Very significant investment in the city's park system.
Yeah, let's stay on parks and recreation for a minute. Yeah, $87.5 million for downtown riverfront parks construction, $26 million for park improvements, some $500,000 pool maintenance, $1.9 million for lifeguards, a lot in there that says this is an important part of our city, right?
Well, that's right. And particularly, it's very noteworthy on the downtown front. Look, about $55 million of that amount you referred to is to kind of help build out what's called Shipyards Park West, the site of the former Jacksonville shipyards where the USS Orlick is located, to create some lawn space, help support the Orlick being there, extend the North Bank River Walk through that property as well. That's a big ticket item, but there's also $12.5 million to help revitalize Metropolitan Park. $20 million for Riverfront Plaza, which is the site of the former Jacksonville Landing. And then, like I said earlier, $15 million for the Emerald Trail. Probably welcome news for Emerald Trail advocates, given that they just lost a federal grant of about $150 million as a result of the budget legislation Congress recently passed.
All right, Chris, stay with us. And you stay with us as well. You know, healthcare has been a priority for the mayor, a 3-time cancer survivor. We're going to look at some of the detail in the budget on that when we come back on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
And definitely one of the popular things we do on This Week in Jacksonville when we do Hand on Government. So final moments here in this episode with Chris Hand. One of the elements of this city budget proposal from Mayor Deegan is about health care. Some $7 million for a health program called HealthLink Jax. It's telehealth, other things that she's got in there. That is, what would we say, on brand for this mayor who at the beginning said, we've got to do something to make it better for the people of Jacksonville.
Well, I mean, this has been again, the mayor has been sort of a passionate advocate for kind of expanding healthcare access for years, long before she actually became mayor as well. So nothing surprising there. And I think particularly significant at this moment, Kent. Look, we know one of the major changes in the big bill that Congress just passed is significant changes to the Medicaid program, which could result in a significant number of current Medicaid beneficiaries losing their health insurance benefits. That will shift even more of the burden of providing health care to organizations like UF Health Jacksonville. In addition to the investments you just mentioned, there are two very significant appropriations to UF Health Jacksonville. Number one is the city makes an annual contribution of about $56 million to help support UF Health Jacksonville, but a contribution to help match what the state has done to honor someone who is a mutual friend of ours. The city is also making a $10 million contribution in support of the Leon Haley Trauma Center at UF Health Jacksonville. So again, those are the two probably biggest healthcare items, along with the others you mentioned, but they take on an added significance right now because of the changes in federal law that are certainly going to impact health coverage in Florida and other places. That's going to mean the importance of organizations like UF Health and other providers that help assist folks who have problems getting access to health care becomes even greater, and the city is trying to be a partner in that.
Just briefly explain for people if they don't know why UF Health would get that money from the city. Why is the city concerned about what a hospital does?
Well, because that's a public hospital. That is the city of Jacksonville's public hospital, and its mission is to help provide health care access to others who are not able to get it through other places. So it's long had.
They're not going to turn patients away.
That's right.
Say,
they
do
don't.
You have health care insurance? If not, see you later. They don't.
That's
do that.
done. And people who've lived in Jacksonville a long time know this as previously as Shands Jacksonville that was taken over by UF Health a number of years ago. But it really is kind of exists to make sure that everybody in the community can have health care. They're going to inevitably have some financial challenges because of some of the changes in federal health care law. And so, again, the city's sort of doubling down on its commitment to UF Health and other health care initiatives during this budget.
Another part of the budget that caught my eye, youth literacy, higher education. There's almost $1.4 million in library renovations, then $500,000 for additional library materials, but almost $50 million in Kids Hope Alliance program funding, too.
Well, that's right. I mean, and again, I think this is an area that we saw in some of the discussions about the budget. The mayor included in her address, and we've heard from President Kevin Carrico since then. This is an area of interest for him as well. So that Kids Hope Alliance funding, Kids Hope Alliance, what used to be known as the Jacksonville Children's Commission before it underwent sort of a name change during Mayor Curry's administration. This is an area of shared passion from the council president and the mayor. So this is actually, you hear a lot at times about ways in which a mayor's office and a council are kind of fighting each other. This is an area of likely
They won't fight
collaboration.
it, yeah.
Probably not on this one.
Yeah,
No.
Kevin Carrico, part of Boys and Girls Club, Northeast Florida. So it's clearly a passion professionally, in addition to what he might be doing in leadership here. Saw a couple of things for universities too. $8.7 million for Edward Waters, $2 million for a sports facility on the Jacksonville University campus. So this is spread out a little bit in terms of this vision for education.
Well, obviously, cities and counties want to partner with the institutions of higher learning that are in their communities. So not unusual for a city of Jacksonville budget to have some partnership funding with organizations like Edward Waters University and Jacksonville University as well. We tend to see it in a variety of budgets. That's an important, not only academic relationship, but economic relationship. Obviously, universities are key places of economic activity and create economic activity, and that's always a priority of any mayor and city council.
And there's that workforce development component too, because I know Edward Waters and JU or UNF, any school here is saying, what's going to provide the best value for the companies that are in town, the people who are going to be here? We're basically out of time, Chris, but I appreciate it. I know I get feedback from many of you saying, boy, I always learn a lot when Chris Hand is on the show. So, Chris, thank you very much.
Ken, thank you for having me as always.
All right, so next time, Mayor Deegan plans to join us. She's going to be right here, and we're going to get more insight on her budget priorities. We're going to talk about some of the choices that we made. We're also going to look at her solutions for the sudden funding crisis for the Emerald Trail that Chris and I were just talking about a moment ago. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17, and then online at news4jax.com or streaming on News4Jax Plus. And don't forget to check out This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. This episode of our podcast looks at the impact of the governor's veto on public radio and TV. David McGowan from WJCT joins us. You can find new episodes of the podcast every Thursday at 9 a.m. And then you'll be able to find it right now on News4Jax Plus. You'll find that under the channel This Week in Jacksonville. You'll also find This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition available wherever you find your podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, or YouTube.
See why every day more people are choosing News4Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.